Now, a group of doctors and academics say that sugar levels in food need to be cut by nearly a third to save lives and to stop the UK's rising obesity levels. Action on Sugar, the organisation, have likened the danger posed by sweet foods to smoking, to tobacco. Say apparently healthy foods like fat-free yoghurt, for example, can contain the equivalent of up to 5 teaspoons of sugar. By comparison, a can of Heinz tomato soup has 4 teaspoons of sugar in it, and a Mars bar, perhaps less surprisingly, has 8. At Rowan Bridge, Five Lives Rowan Bridge has been seeing what shoppers know about the sugar in their food.
A few items in the bag here. Yeah. Going to see how much sugar you think's in each of them. So, can of tomato soup. How many teaspoons?
It's about 2.
Twice that. There's 4 teaspoons of sugar.
Oh my God.
Bottle of vitamin water?
Yeah, there's about 28 grams in that.
There's actually less than that. There's 15. Zero fat yoghurt?
I would say about 3.
There's 5 in there.
In a 0.0% fat yoghurt? I don't believe that. I'm not eating.
You look astonished.
I am actually.
How much attention do you pay to how much sugar there is in what you eat then?
Not a lot. I don't. I just put it in.
A single pot of yoghurt? Zero fat?
There'll be some sugar in there because they make up for this loss of fats to make it taste nice. I say 3.
There's 5 in that.
Yeah, I know it's going to.
Surprised at
It's
that.
going to be. Yeah, but it's no fat, low fat, so they make it up with
Are you
sugar.
surprised by that?
I am very much, yeah, they say them are good. I don't look, I just buy them without thinking about it really.
Does it worry you? Are you surprised by what you've just seen?
Yeah, I am, yeah, definitely.
Well, let's talk to Mark Wallace, who's the executive editor of the Conservative Home website, and Rennie Elliott, who's the founder of the supermarket chain Planet Organic. Good afternoon to both of you.
Good afternoon.
Mark, first of all, do you think there should be more regulation on sugar or just more information and people can do what they will after that?
I think information and education has got to be the way to go. You know, what really worries me about this campaign being launched today is we've seen this, obviously it's been compared by some people today to tobacco, which seems quite an absurd comparison, but also Action on Salt, all sorts of Action on groups that have, over the last 20 years in particular, have just set out to nanny people. And nobody seems to realise that the more we try to nanny people and treat them like children, the less impact these things seem to have. And actually, if you patronise people, the less responsibility they'll take. So I really hope this isn't going to be another push for fat taxes in the UK, for taxes on sweet products, for more meddling in people's lives. Instead, we should be talking about education and personal responsibility.
Rennie, how do you see it?
I think that the government meddles in everything. So to say it shouldn't meddle in food is a bit ridiculous. You control everything. So I think it's a cop-out, really, on something where you don't want to take a stand. I think when manufacturers and retailers, many manufacturers and retailers do not care about people's health, the government has to step in. And having home ec back in the classroom is a good start, but there needs to be a much bigger effort made on this because sugar is incredibly damaging, and everyone knows it's costing individuals and the government an awesome amount of money.
Mark, if you look at cigarettes, because that's the comparison being made here, if you look at cigarettes or if you look at the impact of trans fats, which, you know, there's been government action on that as well, hydrogenated fats, it became obvious that they were causing very serious health problems to huge numbers of people and therefore ultimately costing a lot of money in healthcare that people then needed. If the same is true of sugar, I don't know whether you accept that the same is true, but if it is the same, then isn't it a matter for government to step in and almost shift society or help society to shift in another direction in the way that it has on smoking?
Well, I mean, to take the first question of whether I think it's true or not, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but even I know that if you eat lots of sugar, you get fat and unhealthy. You know, I'm pretty sure every single person listening to this call knows that, and that's part of the problem that we're talking about here. Is that explaining to people don't need explaining to them that sugar is bad for them, or they shouldn't eat too much. Maybe instead of regulating people, we should just say, tell you what, if you eat less and you move more, you will be more healthy and you won't get and you won't be as fat. You know, these things ought to be quite straightforward. I mean, the argument that Rennie made earlier, that government meddles in loads of aspects of people's lives, so why shouldn't it meddle in this one? It is a really troubling argument, I think. What happened to the idea that we are a society that allows people who are adults to make decisions about their own lives? What happened to the idea that you go out, you work hard, you earn your money, you should be able to spend it, and for that matter, live your life as you might happen to choose? This is a really troubling principle.
Well, let Renee come back on that.
Okay, I don't think that's the point today. What I'm saying is that the government controls and regulates many things, and to try and say it shouldn't regulate this, I think, doesn't make sense. I'm not saying I agree with what the government does, but it does regulate many, many issues, especially things that are addictive or harmful. But I think the point about sugar is it has been allowed to creep not only into our sweet foods, which people expect and may understand when you say people should be allowed to make these decisions, but it is now in many of the savory foods that people eat, and I don't think people are aware of that.
We do have quite a lot of regulation.
If you started by saying sugar should be reduced 30%, if you just took it out of savory foods, that would be a huge step forward where it doesn't belong. And it's used to mask or make bad food taste better or cheap food taste better, or in the case of low-fat yogurts, to make a product. Low-fat isn't necessarily a healthy food. The government has said reduce fat. Yogurt is not a high-fat food, so why they take it out of yogurt, I have no idea. And as a strategy, it's not working because there are still obese people all over the country.
Mark?
So in fact, the argument is that, for example, when people have run campaigns like this to reduce fat, your argument is that kind of campaign and regulation hasn't really worked. Can I give you an example just to test this idea that we should regulate more things because we regulate a lot already? According to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, there are 8,500 injuries in the UK every year due to trousers. People putting their trousers on while they come down the stairs, people whose trousers are a bit too long, slip over on polished floors and so on. We regulate a lot of things, as you've said. Should we be regulating trousers? Do we need an Action on Trousers campaign?
I think to say to manufacturers who don't care or take responsibility for people's health that sugar shouldn't be in savory foods, it never should have crept in there, it wasn't in there decades ago, isn't a bad thing. Let people eat, like the woman who was on earlier, the man who said, I don't look at the label, I just buy it. That's the case with a lot of people. They trust the supermarket, they trust the manufacturer. So if you took it out of savory foods where people aren't expecting it, they would immediately cut their consumption. And then it would just be in sweet foods where people, they know they're getting it. They know if they eat a chocolate bar, they're getting sugar.
But in this instance, and I'm sensing it's something you would both agree with, that we need to know, don't we? We need to know that if we're having a nice, healthy tin or carton of tomato soup, that it might well have 4 or 5 tablespoons even of sugar in it. We need to know that if we're eating something that we regard as savoury, like a slice of bread, it probably isn't, or it possibly isn't. That's at least the start, isn't it, Renee?
And bread does have sugar in it, which it needn't. The other thing is the government will regulate, you have to put on a label the sugar, the quantities of ingredients so that you know what is the highest quantity of something in a cereal bar. But what manufacturers do is they hide the sugar by listing many different kinds of sugar. So they'll use glucose syrup, sugar, corn syrup, brown sugar, and what they're doing is they're beating the system because then sugar isn't the first ingredient. It may be oats and then 5 different sugars. But if the government controlled that, say, and said, look, there are 5 different sugars. If you add them all up, it's sugar. It's the same thing, and it is the first ingredient. It may actually put some people off, but
Mark,
it's deceptive.
And finally, Mark, if it could be shown to you that the epidemic of type 2 diabetes that we are told is on its way, surely, could be reduced dramatically by less sugar, would you think the government might be the right people to lead that?
I mean, obviously, from what I've said, I'm extremely sceptical that another layer of regulation is going to correct the failures of previous layers of regulation. But the simple fact is that we need to encourage personal responsibility. We need to say to people, actually, it's your money, your life, your body, and as long as you have the information properly available to you, that it should be down to you. That's what a free society is about. Okay. None of us are adults for the government to tell us how to live.
Thank you very much to both of you. Mark Wallace, Executive Editor of the Conservative Home website, and thanks to Renee Elliott, founder of the supermarket chain Planet Organic.